been a few times,
Absolutely.
been some years since last time we saw each other.
Maybe years. Yes, time flies. Thanks so
Yes,
much for having me.
yeah. So now today we have Thomas for the using AI for testing. So he has a lot of experience on the testing side, automation testing, even co-authoring the book Test Automation Fundamentals. And I think this presentation will be a lot of interest for quite a lot of people, not only developers this time.
Yeah,
So, Thomas, the stage is yours.
thank you so much. So now I need to share the correct screen because I have a couple of them here. As you can see, I'm in my man cave.
Yeah.
So I hope this is working. Yes, you should be able to see elevating testing,
Yes,
right?
we
All
see
right.
the slides.
Yeah, so just to briefly introduce, I've been doing testing and test automation for over 20 years now. I actually studied artificial intelligence at university, so my master's is in AI. However, when I finished in 2006, AI wasn't really in, it was kind of this Terminator future thing, but it was nothing tangible like we have now, right? So when we started our research project around AI and testing in 2018, it was still quite a way of the generative AI landscape and the AI landscape that we see today. And I'll talk a bit about how that developed and how we are doing there. As Nagarro, we're not really a research institute or anything like that. So we're mainly, delivering services and projects and digital transformation and things like that to our customers. But for us, it's always important to be on the leading edge on the one end, and on the other hand, there's just some things that's not on the market that we think is really useful. So we just start building it to be able to do our jobs better. And what I'm talking about today will focus around the experience that we gained there. When does it make sense to use AI in testing? What does not make sense? But also show you a bit hands-on of how that can look like. As you can see in my background, I'm a bit of a techie. There's a 3D printer. There's all of that crazy stuff around here. I'm one of these guys that is now thinking about buying their fourth VR headset. So this kind of exploration and things like that on tech is very much mine. So without that further ado, let's go into the topic. So why are we even considering that there's an issue in testing, so to speak? Yeah. And the reason we think about that is that there's still a lot of issues, right? If we take a look at how much people and companies are spending in testing, that's about a quarter of all IT projects. Yeah, and that's probably on the lower side. If we take into account things like unit testing and development testing and pipelines and all of that, it's probably a lot more. Also running test systems, all of that, right? So if we spend so much on testing, then I think we find all the bugs, right? No, not quite. So we have 2.08 billion, billion cost of pure software quality, just like that. By the way, this is I think this is from the German version, I think. So it's actually trillion, I think. So it's quite a bit of money, and if we do deployment of untesting, and why do we still have so much issues? And the most common issues that we just don't test these things that go wrong, right? It's just stuff that slipped through the cracks somehow. So the interpretation of that could be that maybe we're not testing enough, maybe we're not good enough, maybe we cannot test enough, maybe we don't have enough time. And in our experience, and when we talk about testing, I'm usually talking about the things like testing of an existing product via APIs, via frameworks, via UI, even via end-to-end processes. So this level. So let's call it integration testing and above. Not so much the unit testing itself, where there's also a lot of stuff, and as Guillaume has shown on the coding side, and there's a lot of solutions that already help you with unit testing and all of these things. So I won't be talking a lot about that today. I'll more on the side of testing the processes and the products. And there you're never finished with testing, obviously. There's any non-trivial program that you write, you can pretty much test infinitely or close enough to not really matter for the difference. Right? So when we talk about that, what do I actually mean? I mean, the whole testing life cycle on that level. Yeah? So it's patterns that we have, it's quality in the requirements. Then we go to the non-functional and functional aspects, defining a test strategy, ensuring testability, defining our tests, really defining the individual steps of those tests and the patterns in there. And then ultimately automating it. And when we go even beyond that, we also see that things like making sense of the test results is a big topic, right? If I have a test suite that encompasses maybe 50,000 tests and I just have a fail rate of maybe 1%, that's a whole bunch of tests. If you run them continuously or even if you run them nightly, it's still, multiple full-time jobs just analyzing this. Yeah. So what we see from that is that even if you do automation, even if you do continuous deployment and all of these nice things, if you're in a DevOps lifecycle and all of that, the consequence of that is that testing is still a whole bunch of manual labor. Yeah, you need to define your requirements. You need to analyze your test strategy. You need to write these tests. You need to analyze the results. You need to define these tests. So that you need to maintain the whole thing when something changes. You need to run the test environments. So there's a lot of manual labor still involved, even though we're already starting with automation. And we'll later see what we actually, when we talk about test automation, what we actually mean. So now the thing is, can we somehow make things better with AI? And there's multiple ways that we can do it, and some of them might be maybe not what you expect. So, yeah, stick with me, and I'll tell you a bit about what you can do there. A couple of things that we started in 2018 was there's an old Austrian tradition, which is basically complaining. Yeah, we call it Sudan, which means you complain about what's not going well. And if you sit down with a whole bunch of people who are deeply into test automation, things like PDD and other methods of doing that, and they complain about all of those repetitive things that you need to do, then you see that there's some potential maybe for saving both a bit of effort and on the other hand also the sanity of the people around you. So yeah, there's potential. And if you then have enough beer to go with that complaining, you think that maybe the AI can just do it, the machine can do it. So we actually sat down and created a proposal for this. And now we have a government grant. Yeah, now we have a research project around this, thanks to beer and complaining. But what it does is it tells you where the pain points are and where the improvement potential is actually, right? That's what this does. So we went for a research project, and the first research project we started in 2018, somewhere around there. Yeah. And these were the things we were focusing on. What we can see here is that when we talk about testing and test automation, we usually mean test execution, right? When we talk about test automation, we mean scripts, we mean flows of requests or whatever you want to have, some kind of, flow through the application and taking steps through the application in one way or another, and executing that manually and automatically, and then reporting the results, right? We're not talking about automating testing as a whole. We're just talking about, if we are very specific, about usually regression, test, execution, which is a subset of what testing actually is. So the thought was we go for more, right? We automate more. So smart test selection is selecting tests that are applicable to your situation in this moment. That's changes that have done, how many changes have been made, by whom, to which parts of the application, where's the risk, this risk-based focusing. Then the other thing is you have huge test portfolios. How do you know what they even do? And a whole bunch of other things. And the reason I'm showing you this slide is because we actually had 9 different, for our first research project, which ranged for 3 years, we had 9 different topics we wanted to tackle. Yeah. And this whole research project was initiated, as I said, by AI as a mindset. But it turns out we only need AI for 3 of them, right? The other things we either dropped, or 5 of them we did not use AI for. We just solved the problem. And what AI did here indirectly is it made us think about the things that we can do and the potential and the problems that we want to tackle in the first place. And then realizing, hey, we can solve that just, by traditional development very easily. But for some of them, we did need AI. Yeah. And then for the second part, what we did is we are now thinking of, in the second research project that's now running since 1.5 years, we're thinking now about, because if you look back at this is more around How can we optimize testing when we already have a huge test portfolio that we need to, make more sustainable and more powerful and maybe more lean, But the second project was more focused on how do we really dive into creating test cases. And the funny thing is we started it about 3 months before the first larger LLMs really hit the market. Yeah. So this was basically a perfect storm. We were just in the process of, thinking about how to do test case design and all these things when these LLMs came on the market. And for us, it was really, really good because a lot of the things that we wanted to do, if you look at the screen right now, you'll see that they're very much related to something you can try to tackle with an LLM. Yeah. So switch of gears, we will go away from the meta level. We now go specifically to LLMs and testing and what they can do. So the nice thing about LLMs is they can help you with stuff that's text heavy. They can help you with stuff specifically that's non-critical. We're not there where you want an LLM to be the only decider in something that is critical. And if we look at testing is text heavy, right? Testing is non-critical in the sense is that you're not touching production code directly, yeah? And you have a human in the loop, yeah? That's also very good if you have an LLM, and that also fits with testing. So if you look at it, LLMs can do knowledge retrieval, yeah? Which is very good for testing because we need a lot of knowledge for testing. They can help you with feedback cycles, quick feedback cycles, and give you feedback on the things that you're doing. Yeah? They can review things, which is also very good if we take a look at things like reviewing user stories or design or something like that. They can help you with generating text, which is awesome because usually test cases are just that, text. Yeah. And they can help you with coding, which is perfect for test automation, right? So we see that LLMs are actually, in terms of positioning and the things that they do, a very good match. Yeah, a very good match for lots of aspects of testing. Not all of them, but lots of them. Should you do everything with an LLM and stop everything else? No, of course not. Yeah, and we'll talk about what that means. So, how will this impact testing? Classical question, can we all go home now as testers or test engineers, quality coaches, SDETs, or whatever roles, or developers that are heavily into testing as well? There's can we go home and just relax and do all of that? No, not quite. We'll see that it's still very important to have the human in the loop, and we'll see how that is actually a big challenge because not of the AI, but because of humans. And I'll show you a bit about why that is. So the whole Copilot topic, right? The main thing that a Copilot concept tells you is that it's just that, a Copilot. It's not the pilot. It's not in charge on its own. And we saw in the presentation from Guillaume just now, and Paul also mentioned it in the start, right? We saw that AI is not quite to be fully trusted, right? But we can have a partner. We can have somebody who helps you on the side with doing the heavy lifting, doing the main things, in terms of manual work. And if we talk about hundreds and thousands of test cases, that can scale pretty well. And that can, especially if it's repetitive work, save you a headache as well as a person who's dealing with it. It's not just a productivity gain, it's just something that makes things a lot more comfortable and easygoing, and in some ways also safer, because there's also some other things when you use an LLM as your basis for generating these artifacts. There's a couple of other benefits that you can also get from it. Yeah? So that's kind of the mindset. Question now, what happens to our data with all of that? Data, you need data for it. You need to share your data. And now that we see with the last releases of the previous or the most current generation of LLMs is that we can get very good performance with LLMs that are small enough to run them efficiently, even for smaller, companies like startups or groups. We can see that this is becoming more and more efficient. And it's become more and more easy to locally run also an LLM if you're concerned about this. So also that is something that, especially when you talk about testing and you're in an organization that's very, protective of the data, like if you're in the financial sector or something like that, that you can now cover. Another challenge that you have is every day there's something new. Yeah, these LLMs, if they're not in your control directly, and if you're using something, that's run in the cloud, like we saw previously, This can change pretty much without notice, right? So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? So you need to be very stable in your prompts, in your design, in the approach that you take with these things. And for that, we go briefly into something for prompt engineering. Yeah? What's prompt engineering and how do we deal with it? I think most of you have heard the term, of course, obviously, and you've played around. What we found specifically for the way that we are using LLMs in this case, and I'll show you how that works in just a tiny bit. Our goal is to be with the solutions that we build independent of any specific LLM. Yeah, so we want to have our prompts very broad, very, very well prompted. So the likelihood that if we transfer it from one LLM to the next, or we just switch providers, that is very easy to do. Yeah, or if a new generation comes up, or there are any changes to the LLM that we're using, the likelihood that it still does what we want is very, very high in the first place. And the second thing is, and we heard a lot from Guillaume and from the others also, is how important it is to give context and information and not just a simple command to it without providing any more information of what you actually want out of it, right? So be descriptive, detail as possible, keep it specific, give context. What do you actually want? What is the outcome? What's the format, the style? Very important. And we see an example here. Oh, this is still German. Yeah, it's an example. Instead of just saying what not to do, specify what it should do instead. Like if you find this, don't do this, but do this instead. Yeah. And also in terms of sequence, it's very useful to place the instructions at the beginning of the prompt. Yeah, and illustrate the output format that you want with examples. Yeah, it's very, very useful. And another thing that we found makes a huge difference, and if you read the documentation of the LLM interfaces, is usually there's some kind of way of marking up your context that you want to give it if you give that context at the end. And for some models, this is hash or quotes, multiple quotes. So giving it in that structured way, it increases the likelihood a lot. Yeah, that's the one side. And the other side with testing is that these LLMs don't know a lot about the system that you're actually testing right now, because the likelihood that a lot of documentation of what you're testing right now, if it's new features or something like that, is already well documented on the web is very, very low, right? So what you want to do is that you actually provide all of the information, for example, your existing test scripts, or for example, your existing tests into a vector DB to do retrieval augmented generation, RAG. Yeah? So you can actually provide that context, that information, and the data and information that you need specific to your use case without actually having to train or tune your own model. Yeah, so that's kind of in between of just providing it as context in your prompt itself or as context, or actually training or tuning your model. We have this in between with RAG, which is very, very useful for things like this. Yeah. So this is kind of where we go with this. Yeah. Now let's do something. Let's do something. Oh, I think the screen has gone blank for you, has it? Or can you still see it in the chat? For me, it looks blank now, somehow. Okay, it's back. So let's go here.
Everything's okay, Thomas.
Okay, perfect. My screen just went blank. Maybe it's just a power outage or something like that. Let's see. Okay. So there's one more thing, is when randomness takes over, and we've seen that with Guillaume. Yeah, it's creative. Yeah, it hallucinates. It does things like that. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the human factor of that? And I'll show you what I mean just directly hands-on in a bit. Now let's switch to the demo, because the demo says more than 1,000 words, and I'll show you just for ease and for less to go wrong. I've recorded it previously, but we can also see a live demo if you're interested. But let's go with it. So the thing that we built around this, we call Quality Copilot. You see it on the screen right now. On the left side, you see your user stories and epics that you maybe get from whatever task tracking system you use. Maybe it's Jira, maybe it's something else. Yeah. So you see there's one epic called user authentication and registration, and we've just selected a user story called user registration on the left side. Yeah. In the middle, you see the content of that user story. Yeah. And then you have this panel on the side where you can actually do some actions. Yeah. And one of these actions we'll see right now. Yeah. Let's go for this. So we press generate recommendations, and what it does now, it takes a look at these user stories that the user story on the screen right now, and it tells you, hey, maybe this is not quite clear and unambiguous, because we said we need password criteria, but we actually didn't tell it what the exact password criteria should be. So now we ask the system to create a proposal of how to make it better. Yeah. So what it did now is it actually added specific criteria around this password. Yeah. Before it was just like, for example. Yeah. Now it's actually giving us criteria. And one of the first things about the human factor is we expect this to be a co-pilot. So we expect the human to be in the charge who actually knows what they're doing and can differentiate between a change that's good and a change that's not good. Yeah. So to make that easier, we did just change highlighting. Yeah. We just did this change diff, basically, diff visualization here. So you can see what it has added and what it has changed. Yeah. Now this looks a bit better, right? Obviously, I maybe want to adapt this. Maybe I want to have a different amount of characters. Maybe I want to change it slightly, but the heavy lifting is there, right? And this is a very simple story, but if you have some more elaborate things, this can be a lot more text and a lot more complex and a lot more work. Now, if we take a look at what's needed for this, we obviously need more context about this application to be able to do this for a non-trivial story, right? So we need in the background all of the knowledge about the product that you're actually testing. User registration is fairly generic. It's fairly standardized. So for a demo, it's really, really good. Yeah. But if you actually need the background information of the product and it's a more maybe deeply ingrained specific user story, you need all of that information to be available to the AI in the background. And that's actually where the meat comes in and where you need to do a bit of work to make that happen. But let's go further with this. Okay. Now let's go on this. So up there we go. So now we changed it maybe to 12 characters, which is nice. But now let's go and see what we can do with this. Now this is obviously also available to the LLM. So now I can also ask questions about the user story and the epics. So I can do research. So this is the knowledge retrieval part, which is, nothing too special, but it can be very useful, especially if you make it actionable. So now we can tell it, for example, to edit the requirements so it has acceptance criteria at the end. And it'll go and it'll add some acceptance criteria, right? And it does and puts them at the end. And if you ever worked in a project that should have acceptance criteria, you're likely to have experienced at least one instance where these acceptance criteria were not there, because it's just a lot of work to do it. But you should do them, and this makes it a lot easier. And I also mentioned before that there's some other advantages of using an LLM or something structured in this process. And this means, and what I meant by that is that you, for example, can also, in your base configuration of a tool like this, you can try to enforce standards. You can tell it, hey, we need acceptance criteria. They should start with acceptance criteria, and then list in a numbered bulleted list. In a numbered list, it should list the acceptance criteria. So we can now start standardizing also things that before maybe every person did slightly different, in their format, which again helps us with any structured activities that we want to do. So let's go further with this. Next step is now we have our use case and our user story defined well. Now we want test cases, right? So we want to add test cases, and maybe this is in something like X-ray or some test management tool or test case documentation. So we connect to that, we retrieve whatever is there, and then we say generate test cases. And the user story that we've selected on the left side, it'll start generating these tests. And we can also see in the lower right corner, not quite corner, but you can see functional. So when we pop that up, we'll see that we can also generate things like accessibility or performance test cases for this. So it starts doing that. And obviously, there needs to be a human that verifies each of these and completes these, and there's probably some missing, and some might be not quite accurate. So it's, again, important here that the human is in the loop for this and reviews this. Yeah. So now, again, we can obviously use the chatbot to interact with these tests and save them back to the test case management system. So now it will make those changes that we required, and it tells you which one it edited now, and it adds that aspect to that test. So yeah, by the way, just to mention, I'm talking about a lot of systems that are integrated here, right? Things like Jira, X-Ray, and we'll see the test automation repository. In the ultimate vision that we have for this user interface that you're seeing right now, it maybe even goes away because we instead use direct integrations with these systems, just like Guillaume showed, for example, that the solution was basically a part of that user interface that they were using in the first place, rather than add another user interface on top of that. Yeah? But for visualizing and for working like this and for exploring, this is very, very useful to use instead. Yeah. All right, now we save the whole thing back to the system. And now these test cases that you saw, they were very high level. They were just like basically business test cases. They were not specific, they were not technical, and they're not detailed enough to actually be able to automate them, yeah, or to even execute. Maybe a manual tester who knows the system can execute them, but it's not like a given. So what we need to do now is we need to be more specific. We need to clear it more out. And for that, we use Gherkin. And I know that Gherkin and BDD style testing has become under a lot of flack, in the last couple of years. But I still think writing it down in a structured way, what you actually want to test, is very, very useful and valuable. So we decided to use that for this demo here. Yeah, and it just goes through those tests, and it tries to actually give you a step-by-step feature file style thing, right? And the idea is that this is then saved back to the test automation repository that you have, yeah. And now you have, or maybe also to your test management tool, wherever you keep your feature files, and they're available there now, right? But as we all know, feature files you cannot execute just by themselves. Yeah? You need a step definition for that. So that's the next thing, and also right now the thing that we're still researching most on. Oh, wait a sec. Now it should. Hopefully, no. Is it running? I'm getting confused with my three screens. Now we switch to the test script, and we can see we can choose a couple of languages. That's really not for a real use case. For a real use case, obviously, we would use your existing test automation portfolio. That's in the tests that you already have as a basis for the patterns that this system uses for generating tests. But in this case, let's just choose Python with Playwright, even though that's a bit of a weird combination. So we see that it can generate it. And obviously, you need to tune this. And this is also right now the part that needs the most manual attention afterwards. We're still developing that a lot. But it's promising. The other parts we know are really are fairly accurate and bring performance improvements and sanity improvements to the people using it. For this part, for code generation, that is still the weakest link in our opinion, this whole thing. Yeah, just to be clear. And yeah, when we come to where we stand with this whole thing, we started it because we think it's useful. We are now together with our customers exploring this a lot. And we have a couple of learnings already, and we see that it works, but we also see that it still needs attention, and we're still far from done with this. And there's even a lot more potential with a lot of these things. Yeah. So we launched it back in October to our first customers, and yeah, looking forward to more data to really see where this is headed and how much performance gains, if at all, we can get out of this. Right now, the things that we're doing look promising, but those were really well put together from the start. Yeah. So maybe it's a bit of a skewed thing, but we'll take a look at this more. Yeah. So basically what you've seen right now is we took the requirement management system like Jira, Azure DevOps, whatever, and we improved the requirements there together with the context documents that you can just upload or link or use in RAG. Then we generated test cases and the test steps within the test case management system and stored them there. And finally, we generated test scripts for automation, right? So this is the beginning part. If you remember in the start, we showed this testing life cycle. And then the classical test automation takes over. And maybe you have things like self-healing or test case selection there. So that is then automated. And then at the end, the reporting, we also have AI-based stuff for analyzing large test case portfolios and results. This can also be automated. I won't talk about that too much today, but there's a lot of potential also when it comes to actually making sense of test results. And with that, if we chain these things together, the creation of test cases, the execution of test cases, and the evaluation of the results, we actually have the whole picture in that sense. We still didn't talk about infrastructure and test strategy and these things, but for the core, let's say, operational part, we're now covering the whole thing, which is, I think, really, really exciting because we've never been at this place before, at least for testing. Yeah, this is a completely new territory to have automation cover the whole thing. Yeah. So now, if this is as cool as I say and has so much potential, don't we get lazy? But that's actually the thing, right? So the results that we have actually, they're quite exciting. So there's a lot of stuff happening. The thing is that humans become complacent, right? They start just accepting whatever is proposed to them after a while. If the system works well enough, they start trusting it. Yeah? If they don't trust it, then you can stop. Yeah, then something is wrong, you need to fix it. But if it's good enough that they trust it, and this is what we've seen, is that they start just, yeah, that's okay. I'll just save. Oh, this looks fine. Just save, right? Which is terrible. This is testing, right? This is the last bastion of quality, basically, if you see it in a classical sense, right? So you don't want people to just say, hey, no, go, this is fine, right? That's exactly not the purpose. And the diff highlighting that you saw was one of these things that we wanted to address. Another thing that we're doing or thinking of doing is actually fault injection. Yeah. So we want to introduce issues into the things that it's generating consciously. Yeah. And we don't let the person, the human, save the results back to the system before they've not fixed that issue. Yeah. Which actually we can again do with the LLM itself and with the system itself. Yeah. So safeguards like that we need to think about. Otherwise, it works too well. And if you have like, let's say, a thing that's 99% accurate, people will just start, go like this, go. It's fine, and not really think about what there is actually on their screen. Yeah. So we need to get their attention back to it. Otherwise, the whole co-pilot aspect gets completely lost. And until we're at the stage where these LLMs and systems can be, fully self-reliant in the quality that we expect, which especially in testing is very hard to do because it's not a purely mechanical problem. Testing is a lot about context, also social context, also, operational processes, a lot of maybe even physical context. Maybe that guy that uses this feature sits in this room and he has his back to the door, so he needs a specific feature to do this and that. Yeah. It's very, very hard to put that into digital data and then learn from that data. Yeah, so this process, especially for testing, is very hard to fully automate without any human oversight. So we need to make sure that oversight is in place. Yeah. So finally, how do you start with this? For us, it started by just, talking to people and listen to complaints and listen to what's going on, taking the things that you've always wanted to do, taking the things that, people have always complained about, just sitting down and just taking a look at where you stand. Obviously, there's all this whole, what is the new business model? Can we be disruptive in the industry with this and that feature when it comes to AI? But when we talk about really making it useful for our hands-on thing, the thing that we learned for now 5-6 years of research in this field is use it as a trigger for innovation, even if that innovation maybe ends up not using AI, but use this momentum to discuss, to find out what you, in your life cycle, in the development life cycle that you're focusing on, can improve, want to improve, the steps that you want to see, the features that you think might make sense. Often this is basically given to you on a silver tablet once you talk to people. Yeah, and just think about how can you solve that and use it as a trigger for innovation with one new tool that's really powerful, but one new tool in your arsenal, basically. And then just go for it. Do small cycles, prototyping, exploration, really try things without committing to anything too early, and then see what works, and then really go for that and take it seriously and drive it forward. There's a lot that you can do. Yeah. So finally, where will this take us? Yeah. Our vision is basically using humans for what they can do best. And testers, especially people who see themselves as testers, are really good at creative destructivity, in the sense of they're really good at finding issues. Yeah, just putting the finger and immediately something breaks. And I'm sure you know somebody like that. Once they touch something, it breaks. Yeah, it's the good side of the demonstration effect. Yeah, and once you have the time to do that, and to really use the time to critically think about the product, challenge the product, find the issues, and to have that time, you need to take care of this repetitive, day-to-day, boring stuff. Otherwise, you never have this freedom and slack to actually focus on improving the product by challenging it. And this is where this can help, right? And this is where we really think about how this can continue. For this year, what we personally at Nagarro in this research context are doing is that, as I mentioned, we have these pieces now, generating the test cases, executing the test cases, evaluating the results, but we don't have them chained together in the way that we want yet. So there's, for example, on the one side, it's the technical integration. On the other side, it's the evaluation at the end of the test results doesn't know anything about the stories that came in the beginning. So things like that, we still want to improve. And obviously, there's a lot of tuning and just work to be done to improve all of these things, and tune them, and learn more and explore more and find and also see it really in practice in a large long-term project, what the effects are and how it develops and what the feedbacks are. So it's very much something like a rock that you get rolling at the start of the hill, and it's still at the start of the hill, and I want to see what happens, in the next couple of years when it goes maybe into an avalanche. Let's see. Yeah, but that's where we stand right now. And yeah, with that, that's the main story I wanted to tell you, and the main thing I wanted to show you today. Yeah, we can. Happy to take any questions or discussions, and obviously don't hesitate to contact me if you're interested in anything and want to hear more or see it in action. Super happy to share this. As you can hear, I'm super excited about it. This is really something that's part of passion for us. So I'm super glad to chat about anything on that.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So, yeah, really interesting topic, and where it will lead us to. Currently, I see no questions yet asked in the chat, but I will have one for you.
Yes, please.
Considering all this potential of this testing through AI, what do you see it would be its most easable reach limitation?
You mean in the long term, or you mean right now?
In the foreseeable future.
The foreseeable future. Yeah, I touched on this, I think, slightly, which is just how much information do you have digitally available about the product that you want to build, right? Because Guillaume showed, for example, the Fibonacci thing. That's very well documented, right? You can also copy and paste it from somewhere else. I mean, it's super nice that you have this feature of doing it, but it's not much different from just copying and pasting it from Stack Overflow, right? But if you have a product that's specific to one country, company, within the legal limitations of that, in this particular office, with these particular people that are using that system that you're testing, how do you get that information about what they actually need into the system? And I'm not sure an AI will be able to solve that unless we have really, humanoid robots, androids running around actually experiencing the whole context. And for testing, you need that whole context. Otherwise, it's very, very hard to do when you talk about testing on a business and user level, right? And companies, if you have large scale, like for example Google or others of the big ones have, right? You can just do A/B testing and things like that. You can do these things, but then that's not critical testing. That's trying out different things. But you can gain user feedback and error reports. But if you're like a bank, you cannot do A/B testing. That's just not applicable to you. You need to make sure that this is working, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for the answer. There is another question that pops up now. Is this quality copilot an internal Nagaro tool, or is it free to use in some way?
I would hesitate to call it a tool. It looks a bit like a product. It's actually not. It's actually basically a framework or a collection of modules that for this demo we have connected in a particular way. The way that we do it usually is when we work with people or customers, we bring this in basically, and we build a solution based on this with them. But consider it more like an internal framework that we build a specific solution for a customer, and then they're free to use it however they want afterwards. The only thing we ask is that they don't sell it under their own name as a product. But other than that, they're completely free to use, and I'm super happy to talk. If you're more interested in how you can use it, we can for sure do that as well. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see if other questions pop up.
As I mentioned, we built this because we didn't see anything on the market that does this, and we think it's really, really useful, especially for ourselves. And I mean, for us, the mindset is this. If we deliver test services to a customer, we're the ones doing this work. So the easier, the better, the more fun this work is. We profit from this. This is the purely egoistic perspective, you know?
Yeah. Also, I think that considering all this stuff, it even helps us to maybe create even more stable products on the long term. Since using this AI, we can test things that normally you would probably not think about, or you would think in probably at the end of the development phase when it's a bit too late for some cases.
That's one aspect. It's just this shift left thing, right? Test early, test often, and automate more on that end. And the other end I touched upon is this, creativity. And creativity needs headspace. I'm not creative in my testing if I have a checklist that I need to go through, right? That kills creativity. Because after you're done with this checklist, you don't have the energy anymore to be creative. So if we can get rid of that checklist and say, hey, the checklist is done by this, right? You focus on sitting down and destroying the product, fighting the product, kicking its ass, basically. That's the fun part, and that's where the value also comes in. Because and also James Buck was a really strong propender of this. Sit down an experienced person with a critical mindset with the product, and they will find a lot more critical issues a lot quicker than by going through a checklist. But you can only do that if you have the headspace for it.